we're back. So now we're starting into our next main presentation. This presentation is going to be looking at 3ds Max 2012 with the Subscription Advantage Pack, which we just announced this week. Subscription Advantage Pack is a series of features that we release for a number of our products that are only available to people who are on subscription with the products. In this particular case, we're going to be looking at broadcast graphics and that style of work. And so I'm going to hand it over to Chris Murray, who's going to take us through what's new.
Good, I guess it's afternoon, officially noon. So if you're still in bed, if you're just rolling in, welcome back to the world. Again, my name is Chris Murray, and we're going to be taking a look at the new, some new features in the 3ds Max Subscription Advantage Pack. When we were first putting this set of tools together to add to the subscription pack, we did a lot of focus group research, and one of the things that we got a lot of feedback was we need to have some really tight interoperability with After Effects. We have a lot of customers that are doing motion graphics with our software, and it's important for them to be able to close the loop and to be able to work a lot faster, to go from what you see on my screen here, which is the wireframe playback of our scene here, to this, which is the rendered preview. This is just a screen grab preview. This is not actually a render from 3ds Max. To this, which is the full final render out of After Effects. So we need to close that loop. And the other part of the focus group information that we got was that time is money. We need to be able to create things quickly. The tools have to be very accessible. Everything needs to be very close to the top of the interface to do that. And so that really kind of stuck with me. I received a lot of feedback from my friends about that. So that's kind of what I want to focus on here. So again, I just kind of want to explore how we get from this basically to this, using the new state sets feature for render passes and some other things as well. So I'm going to go ahead and close this up. And I'm actually using state sets right now. And before we actually jump into the full render pass configuration, I want to kind of revisit some things that 3D Studio Max does really well. You know, 3D Studio Max celebrated its 3ds Max celebrated its 20th anniversary last year. And I just want to kind of go back in time a little bit and remember that 3ds Max does some things very well and very quickly, and those are some things that I want to focus on right now. So I'm using state sets to kind of do some scene management. I'm going to come back to state sets in a second. So I just want to jump right in, and I want to talk about cloning. 3ds Max has been, you know, it's very easy to clone things in Max, and motion graphics and broadcast designers are always cloning and copying and flipping and rotating, and it needs to be fast and easy, and so that's kind of what I want to focus on here. So very quickly, I'm just going to grab a couple of instances here of this box, and I'm just going to zing them out this way. And, you know, we've all done this part. I mean, this is kind of the easy part of cloning. What the challenge becomes, how do we actually do some animation quickly with the things that we've created? So we have these boxes here. I'm going to go ahead and just quickly reset my timeline back to 0. And what if we want to animate this box and then do some interesting things with all the other ones? Maybe it's part of a you know, kind of a placard reveal or an animated billboard or something like that that's going to be sent over to After Effects for some heavy lifting and or you know, rendering. So we're going to go ahead and go to frame 0, turn on our auto key, and I'm very quickly going to rotate this. Now, I've gone into rotate mode, and I could easily do that, but we have other tools, again, keeping in the spirit of time is money and keeping things fast and quick. I'm going to go over to the Transform toolbox, and this is a tool that is available to you to quickly rotate things in any view. And the cool thing is we don't actually have to be perfectly aligned to the view to do it. We only have to be close. So for example, if I'm in this axis, I'm roughly aligned to this one, and I want to rotate it 90 degrees left or right, that's all I need to do. So in this one, I'm just going to roughly align it there, flip it, and it's been rotated. So quick and easy tools that we can use to do that. And let's actually, I'm going to undo that because I also need to be at frame 15 or so. So we'll drop it out there, and we'll just go ahead and redo that very quickly. Okay. So we've got our animation on this. How are we going to get this animation to all of the other objects? Now, if we had done the animation first and then cloned it, of course, our animation would have been on there, and it would have been easy to do it that way. But then we would have the challenge of quickly editing everything in our track view and curve editor. So I want to actually take a look at a script here called Key Transfer. I like showing scripts that are made by the community because I like the fact, it just reinforces the fact that 3ds Max has a great following. There are artists out there that are passionate about it, that want to contribute to its success and make tools that other artists use. So this is an artist-created tool for other artists. So I just kind of want to thank John Martini for making this available. If you just go out and Google key transfer for 3ds Max, it'll come right up. So I'm going to go ahead, and I've got this object selected, and we're going to pick this object as the animated object. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the animation off this object and put it on the other objects in the scene in some interesting ways. So I will zoom back out here. I'm going to just select all of those, and I'll open up our advanced parameters. Now, what I can do here is I'll go ahead and I'll just put a delay on there. And actually, wait, before I even do that, let's transfer the animation and see what happens. So I'll back up here, and we scrub through, and we can see, okay, the animation has been transferred to all of the other objects. So that's good. We could have done that. But let's maybe introduce a little bit of chaos into there. So I'm just going to go ahead and introduce some offset variation. The thing I like about this script is that I can automatically delete all of the keys by saying delete the existing keys and transfer our new animation to there. So now we can see that we get a lot of variety in there. And so it looks a little bit more random, a little bit more organic. Again, quick and efficient. Easy way to do that. I'm going to go ahead and delete these keys. Another interesting thing that you can do with this is you can also select based on a proximity. So for example, I'm going to choose the box in the center here as the center of my proximity. We'll preview the group, and I'll reduce the radius a little bit. So you can see we have a lot of things in there. Just make sure all the keys are deleted. And I'm going to add a delay of 5 seconds or 5 frames to that, and we'll transfer the animation. So now we've transferred the animation to the objects in the middle, and it's kind of timed. So we have both the stagger and the kind of randomness to it, so we can get some really interesting effects. Again, quick, easy way to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at another form of cloning that you're probably familiar with, but I want to show it to you in a little bit of a different way. So I have this object here, and if we go into our Tools drop-down menu and we go to Align, you'll see the spacing tool. Now, you've probably seen the spacing tool used like this in the past. I'll go ahead and pop in a number here. I'll choose Pick Path, and you can see that we can grab, let me do that again. I'll select this object, choose the helix, there we go, and we'll click Apply, and you can see that these boxes have been applied along any path. Okay, that's really not that new, but what's interesting is that we can also use the Pick Points control. And this is a very quick and effective way to quickly begin to duplicate objects. Let me go ahead and do another line there, say Apply, and we'll arc rotate a little bit. I'll pick a couple of more points. And again, this in combination with something like key transfer is a very effective way to get objects in your scene and do some interesting things with them. The last thing I want to look at in terms of cloning is definitely a little bit different. So I'm going to generate a cube right here in the center of my screen. I'm going to turn on my grid. We'll pop into the middle there. Go up here. I'm going to go ahead and close this tool. And here we have a cube. Now, this type of cloning is done in the modifier stack. There's a modifier called Clone. Motionographers and broadcast designers really love this one because it does a lot of interesting things at the modifier level. So I have one object selected here. I'll choose 10 clones, and I'll increase the Z displacement, or what we call the Z offset. And you can see that we get 10 copies of that one object, and this is all at the modifier level. So technically, it's still one object. We can do some more interesting things at this point. For example, we can rotate, we can scale, and we can kind of get new and different types of configurations on all of these because this is all parametric. I can adjust these at any time. So we're going to throw a little animation on this. I'm going to turn on my auto key. We're going to use a bend modifier, and I'm just going to do a simple bend, kind of do a little bit of make some tentacles or something like that, and a cool little design feature we can do. So I'll bend it over this way, and then I'll go up to 20 frames, and I'll bend it back the other way this way. And we just have a really simple animation. All right, no problem. I'll go ahead and turn off my auto key. And now we're going to actually add a new clone modifier on top of that. And since this is a modifier-based way to do this, everything is parametric. So instead of doing 10 clones, we're just going to do 5 clones. I'll go ahead and offset in the Y a little bit. And so now everything that's in the modifier stack is brought forward. and I will go ahead and just oops, wrong scale, wrong one. We're going to rotate on the Z right there. And you can see now we have a pretty interesting thing. And especially since it's animated, we can begin to do some interesting design work with it. If we need to change out the objects, we could copy the modifiers onto different objects. We could adjust the parameters at any time. If I want to go down here and change any of the offsets or displacements, we can really do some very interesting things. And then to just loop this, we would pop into the curve editor and choose our out of range types. So I'll drop down to the modifier here on the bend, and I'll scroll down a little bit, and we can see there's our angle, which is what is animated. We'll choose out of range types and ping pong or loop, and you can see we have something that is quick, animated, and visually interesting. So that's kind of a cool tool to use in this regard. Now I want to move on to state sets. This is really the big news of what we're talking about with the 3ds Max Subscription Advantage Pack. State sets is a new way to kind of organize and think about things in your scene, especially if you're going to After Effects and doing compositing. I have a series of state sets here that control how things are being used in my scene. A state set is very easy to create. All I have to do is create a new one. And what it does is state sets captures a specific change or the state of an object at any particular point. So if there's something you want an object to do or be, and you create a state, it does that. So for example, let's say we want to do a render pass just of these glass tubes that we're going to take over to After Effects. So I've created a new state here. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and begin recording the state. So I'm going to turn on the record button. And now whatever changes I make to any object right now will be recorded. When I call back the state, those changes will be basically brought back at that point in time. So up here, I'll choose my selection set for the tubes. You can see nothing else is selected. I'll just right-click and say Hide Unselected, and everything goes away. Now you'll also notice that I am in a perspective view, just kind of orbiting around. If I'm going to be rendering this out as a render pass, I want to make sure that I'm rendering out of the right camera. So what I can do is just choose perspective, camera 2. That is also recorded. So not only is the visibility of objects recorded, whatever I'm looking through in terms of the viewport is also recorded. Additionally, I can go up here and set render settings. In this case, it's set from 0 to 100. Maybe we want to do the whole time range. Maybe we want to do a test render pass, so we'll set it to 480 by 270. And we'll go ahead and turn this off because all of our paths are taken care of automatically by the compositor link. So that's all set. And all I have to do is turn off our state. And we've now recorded everything in that state. If I uncheck this arrow, it returns us back to basically a basic working state of 3ds Max. And if at any time if I invoke another state, it takes me to that configuration of Max. Now just to show you that things have changed, obviously those objects have come back. If I open up my render dialog box, you can see the range has been reset to 0, the render output size has been reset to 1280 by 720, and the save checkbox check has been turned back on. If I go back to this state, you can see that that state has returned. Active time segment, the render size has changed, and my checkbox is off. So once you have all of your states set up, then what? Well, at this point, I can either right-click on the top of the state set and say Render All States, or I can just render out an individual state. I can say Render Selected State. So at this point, what would happen is it essentially, if you have network rendering recorded, it would set up, it would fire off a network render, or if you're just rendering locally, it would just render local. It'll go through and render all of those states. Now, obviously, I'm using some of these states for scene management, and I don't want to render out a state. I can just turn those off just like that, or I can turn this off, and none of those will actually be recorded. So let's take a look at a couple of other things and show you how we actually get it over to After Effects. So I have a pass here called Backplate, and as you can guess, it's just my backplate. I have a pass here called AO, which is Ambient Occlusion, and if we go over to the Render Dialog box and we go into our Processing tab, you can see that Material Override has been turned on for this pass. Also, you'll notice that Render Elements are off. Okay, so this is where things get really interesting with state sets. I'm doing an ambient occlusion pass as kind of its own thing. You'll notice down here I also have a pass called Render Elements. If I choose the Render Elements pass, I'll go ahead and open up my Render dialog box, and under Render Elements you can see that these are all turned on. So we can actually control not just the render pass at the state level, but what elements are rendering as part of that pass, almost like a sub-pass, if you will. So we can have render elements per state. So it gets very, very deep and very complex, but it all controls it. Now, we have all of these render elements for this particular pass. How does it handle the paths? Down here we have a file location where we can control the render outputs. So I'll just make sure that I have everything set to PNG. And what this does, and this is kind of the interesting thing about state sets, is when I say set path, for every state that's in my scene, it'll automatically generate a folder, it'll generate the subfolders, and all of the render elements per pass will go into those folders. And the reason for that is this, because eventually we're going to want to send this over to After Effects. And to do that, I'll go to the Compositor menu and we'll choose Compositor View. And what this does is this goes in and basically parses all of the data. And I've already rendered all of this data for the show. So give it a chance to stitch it all together. And there is our compositor view. It's a schematic workflow, looks very similar to Slate. And what it does is it basically finds all of the different rendered files for all of the different passes that are over here and wires them up and gets them ready to send over to Composite. Now, there's a couple things I don't need here. I don't need this solids yet because we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, so I'm just going to delete that. And that's pretty good for there. But actually, you know what? We also need to add our render elements. Remember this pass over here? You'll notice I have the diffuse pass, but I don't have any of the other passes underneath it. Let's add those with the Compositor RE view. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that up. Compositor view comes up. We'll give it a chance to find all the rendered elements. There's several hundred frames that it's going through and cleaning up, so we'll give it a chance to do that. Now once this comes up, you'll see that I have all of the render nodes that I had before, and in addition, I'll have my new render elements, and there they are. Okay, so we have the diffuse pass right here, and then we have all of our elements right there, and we're ready to go. Yep, and this one came back in, so we'll just delete it. All right. We are almost ready to head over to After Effects. The last thing we need to do is just do a little scene organization of our comp before we head over to After Effects. So I'll zoom in here on the compositor output, and you'll notice that the backplate layer, just by the chance that it was in this location on the hierarchy, is at the top of our stack. Now I could easily just drag this backplate layer to the bottom of the hierarchy list, but no need to do that. All I have to do is drag the layer order right here in the compositor output, and it'll automatically reorder all of my layers. Now you'll see that AO is at the top, which is kind of where I want it. I can go in and start to set up my comp for After Effects. So I'll choose Multiply, and I can do this for really any other element that I want. If I want to reorder some things, you can see that's the layer that we deleted. That's cool. We can just leave that there. So we are just about ready to head over to After Effects. So let me pop over to After Effects and just show you. This is the final comp. Just so you know what's going on, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a new project right here so that we're starting clean. So we have nothing in After Effects. Let's go ahead back over to Max, and we have our render outputs are all set, and we'll choose Compositor Link. So let me move this a little bit so you all can see it. So Compositor Link, we're ready to create a new link to After Effects. Before I actually create the link, we're only going to want to send over the footage. So I'm going to uncheck nulls, solids, lights, and cameras, which are all things that we can send over to After Effects. I'll choose Create Link, and I'm going to give this a new name. We'll call this one _ Thursday. You can see I've been doing a lot of these. So we'll say OK to that, and the link is now created. I go back over to After Effects, and this is the really cool part. File, open Compositor Link directly from Autodesk. We will create the link, and there's our _ Thursday file. I say save, and it automatically brings all of my footage as I had organized it right into After Effects, including generating a comp. So if I just double click there, you can see all of our footage is here. The backplate is at the bottom where I wanted it. The AO is up at the top. Remember the AO has a multiply on it, so that all came over from 3ds Max. So right away, all of our footage was rendered directly in Max. The composition, the basic part of the composition was set up in Max, and all we did was send it over. Now, this is where things get interesting. You'll notice that it says update to link. Now, all I did was change the blend mode for the AO pass. We're actually going to go back over to Max, and we're going to send over the cameras and the solids. So I have a layer here called solid cams. I'm just going to go ahead and turn it on. And what this does is this basically just makes available to me. I'm going to reset my timeline here to be 3:30, which is the end of our animation. And I'll slide our solid over. So this is a solid that's going to represent our final logo and the final comp. The design department hasn't finished that yet, or maybe we're getting different footage for all kinds of different things. So we're actually going to go ahead and send this over. I'm going to choose my select by name dialog box, and I'm going to make sure that solid is selected. I'm also going to select camera, and I'm going to say OK. Now that those two things are selected, I have an object layer here, and I'm going to turn on objects, and anything that's selected is brought right over. So I have 3 nodes. I don't need to have any render property changes, just those nodes. And we're ready to send it over to After Effects. Now, I've already sent one file over to After Effects. Notice here it says update to link. And it has the name of the file that I've already sent. I'm going to turn off footage. I'm going to turn on cameras and solids. And that's it. I'll say update to link. I pop back over to After Effects, and notice it says update from link. I'll update from the link, and you'll notice right away in our comp are the camera and the solid, and I'll go ahead and turn off everything below the AO pass so that we can kind of see what's going on here. And I'll just move my animation, and there is our solid object that came from Max. Now this is really cool, is not only can we go back and forth in terms of layer settings, but I'll go ahead and select our solid. I'll open it up, and we'll choose our position track. I'll select all the keys on the position and say, you know what, we're not really sure the logo's going to be in the middle. Maybe it's going to be kind of like a lower third. I'll just grab the solid and move it down in After Effects, say update to link, go back to 3ds Max, and you'll notice it says update from link. Now, before I do this so you can see what's going to happen, I think you can all anticipate what's going to happen here. I'll go back to my camera view, and we'll just go ahead and say update from link, and notice that my solid now is moved in 3ds Max. So it's a dynamic interactive link between After Effects and 3ds Max. It's going to totally change the way motionographers work. It's really a new level of capability and interactivity 3ds Max has never had before. The last thing that I want to look at in state sets is using it for scene management. I want to thank our friends at Salesman Buck for providing us this content from their animated short, Meet Buck. It's hilarious. I strongly recommend you guys check it out at salesmanbuck.com. But what I'm doing here is this stuff this stuff may get composited, but right now I'm not worried about that. I actually just want to use state sets for scene management. And if you see here, I'll start clicking through some of the states. I begin to isolate certain parts of our object. So there's just the truck with all the animation controls. Here's our main character. Just his mesh and his controls combined. Maybe what I want to do is I want to combine a couple of things and work. So here we want to do some character work. I actually want to create a new state that is more appropriate in terms of viewport configuration for working with this animation. So I'm going to just choose the state set here. I'm actually going to rename this state set. I'm going to call it VP for viewport, and we'll give it some eternally cryptic name like anim work final, you know. Okay, so now we're ready to create a state set that allows me to work with this character. So I'll go ahead and I'll turn on our record node, and I want to go ahead and hide a couple of things. So I'm going to choose the mesh for Pierre, and I'm going to choose the control for Pierre. Yes, both of those things are selected. I'm going to right-click. I'm going to say hide unselected. So there we go. So now we just have the rig components that we want to work with. Now what I'm going to do is hit Alt-W and configure my viewports to take me to a configuration, a working configuration that's more appropriate for the type of work that I'm going to be doing. Maybe I want access to the rigs in different views. Maybe I want to move this over here. get more of a perspective view on his face. And maybe we're looking at a couple of different side views for this, and that's it. And that's what I want to work on. I'll go ahead and turn off record, and we'll go back to another state, any other state. I'll bring our little fluffy bunny, the dog, back up, and you see it returns to any of those other states. At any time I'm ready to go back to work, all I have to do is re-invoke this state, and it automatically takes me back to not only the object visibility and the rig visibility, but the viewport layout as well. So you can see that the Subscription Advantage Pack for 3ds Max 2012 has some really powerful new things. I highly recommend that if you're able to move up to the subscription pack, definitely do it. It'll save you a lot of time. One last thing I just kind of wanted to mention here, just before we jump out, is that when we're rendering, we also have the ability to export or render out PSD files. So not only can we render out a single PSD file with all of our layers set up, we can also render out sequential PSDs with all of the individual layers, and that's a huge capability for a lot of people. So anyways, I appreciate your time. This is my last demo at SIGGRAPH. I want to thank everybody for coming out. Enjoy the rest of the show, and travel safe. Thank you.